Good morning, everyone. I'm James Malonis. I'm your Central Area Director for the Ontario Real Estate Association and your 2021-2022 Chair for the Young Professionals Network Committee. Today, we have a great topic at hand, and we are joined by Kenneth Laroza, Russel, Lalovich, and Ashley Lowe. So please join me in welcoming my fellow panelists. But before we kick off, I do want to just lay a few little ground rules. For those who are asking if the webinar is being recorded, yes, it is. It will be emailed to you in a couple days. It'll also live on OREA social media channels. And for those that have questions, please say them towards the end of our chat and use the Q&A function versus the actual chat, because the actual chat does get a little congested. And we want to make sure we grab all the questions that we need to respond to. All righty. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, how are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to chat with everybody today.
Yeah, we have a really good topic. Let me just open my questions here. Hey, Ken. Hey, Russell.
Morning.
So thank you for spending the morning with me. I know this is such a great topic. And as we are for some markets already in the spring market, it's a great way to kind of kick off our next 90 days worth of business planning. And I'm really excited because we have three very different individuals here. So we have Ashley, who's a residential realtor, Russell, who's a commercial realtor, and Ken, who's a broker manager owner. Broker record. So I'm really curious to see how the three of you respond to some of these questions. So I want to just dive right in. Ashley, I'm coming to you first. Do you have a process when marketing each listing?
Yeah, so I definitely have a checklist. It not only helps me, but it also helps the sellers as well in terms of, exactly the process that needs to happen and in terms of what type of timeline that needs to take place, especially these days. I'm starting to find that, all the photographers and all the stagers are being booked up. And so we really got to plan ahead.
Yeah, plan ahead is key. Russell, same question from the commercial standpoint.
Definitely, there's a kind of a standard process. You're doing a lot of the same things, maybe not the same way you're doing them residentially, but you're making sure you have all of your documentation, make sure you have all your info from the seller to properly market the property, to target the different markets you want to target, and to make sure you have everything set up properly so it's ready to go on the market and let the market do its thing.
Agreed. Now, Ken, do you feel the same way as a broker manager? Do you have checklists for your agents or the agents that you train?
Absolutely. One of the big things that I was very focused on when helping agents was that, yes, we have to have a checklist. Ashley's correct. You have to have that process down. I think that a lot of agents should go beyond just what's going on in the actual listing, but a little bit before and a little bit afterwards. It has to be ingrained and kind of a little bit more focused. I think that a lot of agents, when we're trading, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of emotion going on, especially when you're dealing with residential. You're trying to help your client to be calm in the situation, get them excited to sell the property. But the thing is, you're also trying to, at the same time, look for more leads, probably help buyers. So there's a lot that you're dealing with at any given point. And having something literally written down is going to help you as an agent get a lot more organized. And I'm sure that everyone here kind of agrees that the name of the game in real estate to be very, very successful is efficiency. Going back to put up a take off your shoes sign is taking time away from your from your prospecting or helping a buyer out. And a lot of times I saw a lot of realtors forget the small things. And I know a lot of agents would say, I have it in your mind because you do it so often, which is perfectly fine. I mean, you create a habit out of it, but going back and every day every time you have a listing, going back and saying, okay, well, these are the things that I need to get done. It's important that you create it. And one of the things that you want to do is start off with whatever you currently do. And I see in the chat, and where can you find a checklist? Start writing down what you do. What do you want to do? And the big thing is, what do you want to do as well? Like, what would you prefer to see? What would you, I know a lot of realtors are new in this, in this call too. What would you want to see your realtor have done for you in your listing, and start writing it all down. You may not get to all of it at once, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to do everything for every listing, especially in this market when you don't actually have a ton of things, or you don't have a ton of time to actually get things done. Just having it all written down and saying, okay, well, in an open house, if you're doing an open house, when do you put out the signs? Which is a huge thing. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to do it right before. There's time that's involved in that. When are you going to buy the coffee for that open house? I'm going to buy it the day before, the morning of. Going to Starbucks and buying one of those carafes of coffee actually takes an hour to get done. So if you do it right before, you're not going to have the coffee in time. And so it's a lot of the efficiency in the organization. And I definitely agree, having a procedure written down is going to help your business succeed and be a lot more efficient in the long run, despite the fact that it takes some time in the very beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I think also with having a checklist, it's really helpful in terms of sometimes educating the seller as well, and kind of talking to them about it, because I mean, these days there's not as many people who aren't sold on staging, but before, when staging is a huge upfront cost, or even perhaps doing some renovations, is a good talking point for you to explain why this is something that would be beneficial for them when they're selling their home. I think also in terms of what you were saying with the open houses too, if you're especially working with a team, or you have a group of people that are kind of catering towards the same listing, it's a good idea to have that checklist, so then you have consistency with your team members as well.
Just actually on that, with the client aspects, that is 100% helpful as well, because remember, when a client contacts you, they're looking for a professional, and it's so much easier to show how professional you are when you show them the process, what's going on, what's about to happen, what to expect. Telling them is great, but it's not as professional as having something there showing them, okay, well, what's the next steps? These are the things that we're going to do. These are the things that we won't do because the market doesn't dictate that we require them. These are the things we suggest that you do, and the costs associated with it. All of that is really helpful in creating a professional vibe to you. So when you do sit down or take a Zoom call, you can walk through it and they say, okay, well, I know what to expect. I know what I'm paying for. Whereas if you're going through it verbally, it tends to be a little bit lost, because, I mean, again, they've decided to sell their home. There's a lot of emotion involved. You're not going to remember a whole lot of everything that your agent's going to tell you. So having that written down somewhere and walking them through just makes them feel a lot more comfortable.
100%. And I mean, to add on to that, we're in such a digital age where we have things like Slack and Trello and things where we can communicate with our clients. I remember my very first mentor almost 10 years ago to the day, he had given me a blank monthly calendar. He's like, break it out. List day is going to be, Wednesday the 1st, go back 5 days for photos, go back 6 days for home inspection, and then move forward, 10 days for offers, whatever the case was. So your clients can physically see what it actually looks like outside of just, a simple little checklist. They're seeing an actual monthly calendar of what the breakdown looks like.
Yeah, I think that calendar is a great idea. There's so many different people now involved in the process, with stagers and marketing companies and all that. Back in the day, it was like somebody would call you and be like, hey, can you get my property on the market tomorrow? And now it's like, no, I can't do that. There's like a process that we go through. It takes so much time. There's other people involved. And, in order to properly market your property and get the result we want, you have to follow this sort of process. And them understanding that timeline is important.
Yeah. Ashley, you're going to add something to that?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say the sellers appreciate that as well, because oftentimes if it's a busy family, they'll be like, okay, now I know exactly when I put my dog in the dog hotel, or when I go on vacation, for example, or work in the office instead of working from home, or something like that. So the sellers really do enjoy when you present them with a calendar or a checklist as well.
So now Ken talked about a checklist earlier, and we talked about writing it down. Are you guys using anything like Slack or Trello to help communicate with your clients?
I've used Slack once or twice, but I don't find that not all my clients have it. And so I don't use it too often. I still do the good old meeting requests.
I was actually a very big fan of Trello. Trello is a great way to create templates and then copy them so that every listing. So what I used to do when I was working with Trello, I was big on creating the template of a listing, for example. And then because you can put check marks and all that stuff, you can create a template. And every time you would have a listing, you would just copy the template, change the template's name to the actual address, and go through the list of what you need to get done. And you can add things like files to it. You can add paper documents to it. You can add links to it. So if you want, either if you're reaching out to specific people for that, you can reach the contacts. It's just a great way to keep yourself organized. It's completely free. And I mean, not completely free. I'm sure there's a premium version for it. But when I used it, it was free. It was very simple to use. It's very straightforward, and you can actually kind of coordinate and change things the way that you want to see it. It can get, I mean, if you use Trello, you can get a little bit lost in building out things with it, but it's a great tool to use. Other than that, it was a very simple, Excel sheet. Excel sheet with check marks. Just go through everything that you need to do. Whatever you want to do, you want to make sure that it's accessible to you no matter what you do. All right. So whether you're at home or you're on the road, if it's a Google Sheet, then use a Google Sheet so that you're not stuck at a meeting, because again, you forget things. To bring it with you on your, at least have a copy of it on your phone so that you can go through the process with your client if you are out and meeting people face to face.
And the nice thing is, if you have a team or an assistant, Trello works really well to share some of the boards and checklists. And because there's things that Ken had mentioned that are taking away from you actually making money. Like, you should not be the one running around putting up, take off your shoes, don't use the toilet, putting up sold signs. That's not your job. That's why we pay someone to do that, right? Even putting out open house signs, you can pay companies to do that actually follow the timeline, because every municipality is different, especially in Toronto. A Scarborough municipality to an Etobicoke municipality are two very different things, and you can get fined if your open house signs are up too early and last too long after the open house. So just keep those little things in mind. But I do want to move on to the next question, and I'm going to lob this back to Ashley, because she's done a really good job. When I can go through the MLS and pick out an Ashley Low listing very easily. So Ashley, are you conscious about creating your brand, or do you just go with the instant read listing?
I would say that I'm conscious of my own brand and having the aesthetic of my brand as part of my listings, but also at the same time, I would say each individual listing or property is unique. And so I would cater specifically to that property. So for example, if I'm doing brochures or social media posts, obviously the aesthetic, I want to have it the same, but the content itself might differ. So for example, if I'm selling a single family home, then, there would be a lot more descriptive items, photos, for example, versus if I'm selling an investment property or something more catered towards builders, then there would be more factual information that's there about cap rates, about lot sizes, that sort of thing. And so the look of it would be similar, but then the content may be different.
Yeah, but I can't say, from someone who works in a similar market to you, seeing your listings, I can pinpoint hands down a property that's yours, because your staging has a very similar aesthetic to all your listings. And it's nice that you kind of created this little online brand, even though you have your brand, but just through MLS photos, I could look at 5 different listings and know which 2 are yours.
Thanks.
So Russell, I have the same question for you, because you work with more commercial and investors. So how are you creating a brand within these listings?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think we do everything we do, same thing. It's all like professional photos. We have a couple of marketing companies that we work with. So everything is a very consistent message, try to keep it professional. But for commercial, I think you're trying to, even more than Ashley's talking about, find your target market and sort of set everything up to try to target those people. And that's really the key to selling commercial. You got to, find the target market, and that target market is generally the buyer that's going to pay the most. And that's your job as the listing agent.
I appreciate that. So Ken, you've had a very long and successful career, both as an agent and as a managing partner, broker owner, manager, broker record. I mean, I could sing your accolades all day long, but what are some of the things you learned early in your career?
One of the biggest things is really I tout it all the time. It's really the efficiency of your business. It's the organization of your business. I've seen top agents do really, really well. And I remember, going through racking my brain, what makes one agent more successful than another? Is it their community? Is it their network? Is it their skill sets? And it was very varied. And one of the things that I really realized was that, you need to have a plethora of things. And one of the things is being efficient. You can be really good with your network, but if you have to keep going back and doing things over and over again because you're not efficient at your business, you're not going to break a whole lot of records. I also saw a lot of realtors who would make on average anywhere between 1 to 200,000, but get stuck, plateau, and they couldn't get anything beyond that. And I would sit down with them and ask them, like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I worked harder. You worked harder than last year. What does that mean? Well, how is that? How are you working harder? Well, I'm out more. I'm doing things more. But then they weren't efficient on the things that they were doing. So yes, you can have 1,000 clients, but if you don't have time to actually service any of those clients, they're not going to result into business. So, one of the things that I always push is that, yes, you can have the clientele and you can have the personality to help clients out. But if you don't have the efficiency, you don't have the time. And when you don't have the time, you don't have the money. And that's really the ultimate goal of an agent is, if you want to make $500,000 a year, you have to find the time to make that money. And like you mentioned, James, you going out there and hiring the people that will do things, that will take things off your plate. A lot of realtors right now have a lot of time, especially if they're new in the industry. You may have a lot more time than money, which is fine. So you can do a lot of the things. And when you create your a business checklist, this is one of the whys I found these are really important, is because you create your business checklist right now. Eventually, when you start to make more money and have less time, you can section off a lot of these things that you've already done and hire someone to do it. And a lot of people who would say, well, I don't have time to train an assistant or an admin. Well, you don't have to. You've already created a list. You just tell them to do things. It's already in your list. You've created earlier on in your career. So it's really just say, okay, well, what do you do on your listing? You call someone to put a sign on the lawn. You just break that down. As you do it, it creates a procedure. So when you're at that point where you're at 150,000 and you can't break that, you need to start hiring someone. You hire someone for 50, you start to make 100 extra more. That 50,000, well, you're not spending 6 weeks to train someone. You're spending a couple of days to walk them through the list, make sure that they understand it. And if anyone's ever hired staff before, you realize that it's not easy because you can't find the right person a lot of times. So there's a lot of revolving doors. So, spending 6 weeks to train someone only for them to leave is not going to be a great great use of your time. So again, going back to the efficiency of your time, you have time right now, especially if you're in the very beginning of your career, or right now when you're trying to find clients. Break down everything that you have. Be efficient with your time, so that when you are busy, you can say, okay, well, I need to hire someone part-time for $20 an hour to do the following things. How do I train them? Simple. You give them your list of the first 3 sections of your list and say, okay, you need to do these things. The phone numbers are here. The contact lists are here. You just call on behalf of my name. And it's super simple, but a lot of people don't go ahead and do it. And that's what I learned from some of the top agents when I was working with them. Is they used to tell me the same things. Like, I wish I did this better in the beginning of my career.
Yeah,
sorry, actually, if I could just echo that, I would say the very first thing I wish I did early in my career was hire an assistant right off the bat, because doing all the little errands took away from money-making activities.
agreed. No, I was just going to add to Ken and Russell's comments, which are that focusing on the target market is really important. And part of being efficient in terms of focusing on the target market is sort of having an individualized checklist for different types of target markets. So for example, if you're catering towards seniors or people who are downsizing, maybe you have a specific list of marketing items you'll do for those types of people as your demographic market versus if it's a first-time home buyer, a single family home that you're trying to sell, maybe you have a different type of list in terms of marketing. So, you know, for someone like that, maybe you're looking at more social media compared to a downsizer who may be looking at more print marketing. And then what I like to do too is like have specific checklists that way. And again, with your team and just being efficient, then you can kind of do the same things over and over again, but for different types of markets.
Russell, anything to add there?
Yeah, one point I was going to say, just a specific thing, especially it works with commercial, but I could see how it could work with residential too, is say you have a listing in a cool neighborhood and you're doing social media ads, tag cool businesses in the area. Like we've done that in the past, and your reach, you know, can grow exponentially off of that. And, you know, they like to know who their neighbors are. They like to preach how cool their neighborhood is. And it's, yeah, just like good synergistic marketing.
Well, and I promised myself at the start of this, I would not have gone down the social media rabbit hole. You guys know I love my social media. When I market individual listings, I always do like little neighborhood highlights. And there's like this much about the property. Like I could care less about marketing the property because you're not selling it. You're selling the neighbor. You're selling a lifestyle. So
Yeah.
Walking through, showing where like the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker are, right? Where's the dog park? What schools are your kids going to? All in like a little 30 to 45-second video. And to Russell's point, tagging those individual businesses or locations in, your reach will just continue to multiply, and you're gonna get more eyes on that property than you would have just simply putting on the MLS.
And all of a sudden you get like 100 more followers, and you know what I mean? Like it's just.
Yeah.
And then there's that. Going back to lists, we've talked about a lot of like seller focused lists, because again, we're talking about marketing listings and individual branding within listings. One thing I think we forget about, especially in Toronto, as actually my work as realtors, but also with Russell on the commercial investment side, is lists for tenants. I feel like we often forget to include tenants in our marketing strategy, because ultimately they're living there or they're working in these businesses that we're trying to sell, and you want them on your side to make sure they allow showings, to make sure they keep the property neat. How are you building these lists? I'm going to open this up to the three of you, whoever wants to jump in. How are you building these lists or checklists or communication strategies with tenants in these properties?
Sure. I'll take the first one. So I guess this is something more specific to multifamily, but something that we've done in the past that's worked really well is we talk to the seller, again, scheduling far in advance. Hey guys, we're going to be listing the property. It's difficult in Ontario with all the rules to show tenanted properties, and you know what I mean? There's a bit of a can of worms. So for a couple of reasons, what we do is we set up like kind of open houses almost, where we'll have like scheduled maybe like 2-hour blocks where, hey, you can go through the units at this time and, you know, talk to the landlord, try to pick your best.
Did Russell freeze, or we all?
And not only does that help, you know, just access in general, also what I find a lot of the times is we end up seeing the same agents, same buyers, and they see each other at the property at the same time, and it creates competition. So that's kind of like a specific marketing feature within multifamily that we've used a lot that's worked really well.
I like that. Ashley?
Yeah, I feel like with tenants, I always just try to be as nice as possible. So try to bring treats whenever I can, bring coffee, and then just having a good relationship with them goes really, really far, because, you know, it's not nice to have some people, strangers in your space. And so I always just try to make sure that they're well taken care of, especially with Broker Bay too. It's a lot easier because you can actually just set the tenant information there, and they can approve showings. And so there's no one just showing up, you know, unannounced or something like that. And tenants really appreciate that, having that clarity and transparency.
One thing I found helped for me personally prior to listing with a tenant during before coronavirus was offering them food for the week of showings, right? Because things in Toronto sell within a week anyways. I was either offering them an Uber Eats gift card for $100 or $100 worth of gift cards to local restaurants. They could have been Swiss Chalet or Harvey's, like something like nothing gourmet, just not to get them out of the house, just for dinner time showings. So that's when a lot of the bulk was, because during the day they were at work, during at night they could kind of control the showings, but that like 5 to 7:30 range was where I found they had a lot of struggle. And just by right up front offering dinner for the week was enough to get them out of the house and to be a little more cooperative. but also at the end of all the showings when the property was sold, bringing in a cleaning lady just to kind of tidy up the house for them, because they have their house is displaced, right? You know, you got a lot of people through, especially this time of year with muddy boots or snowy, salty boots, right? Just enough to keep them on your good side.
Yeah, and tenants really appreciate that. And then in terms of the list that you were saying, you know, just a basic list, for example, having the please remove your shoes and making sure that the tenants are taken care of.
Yeah. Ken, do you want to add to that? I think you just nodded there.
Yeah, yes, I mean, that's exactly it. You know, whatever you decide to do, make sure you just have it written down. And just going back to that list of, you know, when do you plan on giving this gift card? When do you plan on buying the gift card? When do you plan on having the conversation with the tenant? Because these are all things that we have the great idea, and then we forget to do it because we didn't write it down, or we forget the best process to have it done. You know, when do you plan on, if you plan on getting a cleaner for the before the listing, when are you calling them? When are you scheduling them? When are you coordinating with the tenants to go do so? You know, and going back to what everyone was saying, you know, we tend to find, and it's unfortunate, but we tend to see tenants as nuisances. But it's their home too, right? They were living there before the seller decided to sell their home. And so this is really hard for them to be displaced. As you said, you know, they may not be happy with the idea that they may have to sell, they may have to move out because someone's buying their home and they don't have a contract anymore. And so they're going to be, someone's going to be taking them out. And this market, especially when the market was crazy, especially with renting right now, you know, they're now going to have to pay from whatever they were paying to probably 30% more than they were paying. So they're not happy as a whole. And, you know, our vibe will be picked up by the tenants. And so if you treat them like a nuisance, they're going to act like a nuisance. So, you know, understand that they are people. They, you know, I get it. It's a frustrating thing. And, you know, as a landlord, you know, I can see how, you know, there's this school of thought, well, it's our property, we should do what we want. But there's a reason why there's tenant rights, is because, you know, it's very easy to skew into a slumlord. And so it's one of those things where you need to just, you know, respect your tenant, respect the people. I get it. Sometimes it's not easy. Be over nice, you know, be over, you know, you see the minimum rules and go beyond that. You know, you may have to provide 24 hours notice, try to schedule ahead of time when showings can be, so that, you know, you're working with them. That's the other thing. Work with the tenant as opposed to imposing your will on the tenant, saying, well, this is what these are when showings are going to happen. Deal with it, because they're not going to let you in. They're not going to let people in. I've seen tenants make life very difficult for sellers. Before, after, during the transaction, you know, on closing, you know, there's lawsuits that could happen. There's you know, if you didn't do the right thing as landlords and people selling properties for the landlords, you can get in a whole lot of trouble by simply saying the wrong things. And so you want to be very careful on working with tenants, and you want to be very, be respectful with just understanding their situation, because they're not in a happy mood, most likely, to have to live in a home that someone else is selling. They're not making any money off of this. Remember that too, right? They've lived in the property. They probably would prefer to buy a property. They just can't afford so in the city. So it's just a lot of things that everyone kind of have to remember. And when you go through this process in your mind, write it all down. Just write everything down. Figure out the organization afterwards. You know, figure out the timing afterwards. But one of the most important things I would highly suggest when creating any list with your business is write it all down, write down any idea that you have, and then figure out where you want to fit it, if it makes sense. If you're going to meet your clients for a showing or a walkthrough of their home, and you plan on buying them coffee, write it down. Figure out the process, because there's a lot of things that's involved with buying them coffee. Do you know what they take? Do they drink milk or sugar? You know, when do you plan on getting it? Where's the closest Starbucks? You're just going to pick it up on the way there. It's going to take a lot of time. Sorry, my dog just went.
The joys of working from home. But I just want to wrap Ken's point up here, because he's really onto something. And if coronavirus has taught us anything, it's that things can't happen overnight anymore, because photographers are not booking back to back. They're booking hour in between. They're only taking 5 appointments a day. Same thing with, you know, stagers. Like my staging team only does 1 property a day. So I've got 3 listings coming. I have to space it over 3 days, which is a bit of a nuisance, but I understand why. So having these checklists in place are key. I have 2 more questions in my notes that I want to get to before we open up to the Q&A. This one is directed right to Russell. I want to make sure I don't miss the stat here, but 25% of all sales in Ontario in 2021 were investor sales. With you working with investors, how do you market listings to investors?
I mean, usually, okay, so you want to highlight kind of why they should be interested. So a lot of times when you first look at a property, you're like, oh, you know, whatever, that's a single family house, that's not that interesting. But maybe there's an ability to put a basement apartment. Maybe there's an ability to do an additional dwelling unit. Maybe it's a bigger lot and you can sever. Maybe there's a land assembly going on and you're buying a property, and then, you know, hopefully these guys will buy you out one day. Like there could be an angle to it that not everyone understands. And, you know, you just want to highlight that and sell the property, you know, based on its highest and best potential use.
Same question.
I was going to say too that, yeah, just highlighting things that people might not know. So for example, in Toronto these days, garden suites and laneway houses, that's a huge demand for any property. And so, you know, you can easily hire a consultant to write a report to say, hey, you know, this house is actually eligible for a laneway house, or, oh, you know, the minimum height you need for a basement apartment is whatnot. And just providing that information as part of your listing to help market it, because a lot of people don't know that, right? And they'll find it very useful in terms of, and that's also the extra push too, between what they might pay and then what they end up increasing their offer to, is because they know that there's that added value in the future for them.
Yeah, that's a great point by Ashley. Like anytime you can provide information, you know what I mean? And not only for this listing, but just in general, it comes back to you 10 times.
100%. And because we know rather with investors, one thing I find a lot in the city is when there's multi-units within a property, have the financials available, have the P&L, have what the laundry is bringing in, right? Because sometimes you have coin operated machines, like what's the income of that as well? So having all that up front could really result in a faster and higher price sale.
Mm-hmm.
One of the great ways that I saw my partner actually do recently was during for her listing, what she would do is she would create a QR code and attach any of the documents that she wanted to show, so that instead of leaving a document out, because again, during coronavirus, we don't want to leaving things, you know, your client can actually scan, or sorry, not your client, the buyers can walk through and scan the QR code and be sent to a link for something like a HAAWK score or the financials that you want to share, if you want to share those things that way. But it's just a good way to, again, be ready for your to advertise your client's property without having to continuously send things, because that's the other thing about it. Sending something via email, they'll get lost to the seller's agent. The client can actually scan the QR code with their own phones, check it, have the listing sent to them or pick it up. Just a good way to be a virtual in a physical world without having to leave things behind.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities nowadays with a lot of virtual. So you can use Matterport or virtual staging. It's really helpful in terms of showcasing your listing in its best light, even if people might not be able to physically go in and see right away. And it's also helpful too, because if you're having a lot of out of town buyers, for example, if they might not be able to make it during a specific time, then they can use those items to help look at the property.
Just on the topic of virtual staging, before we move on to my last question here, I've seen a lot of agents now where they have vacant properties or properties are still under construction, where they photograph the room with a virtual stage, have the photos printed on a massive size cardstock, and have it in the room. So when buyers touring this like semi-unfinished property, pardon me, they can actually see what it could look like. So great opportunity there. Now, the last question I have for you guys before I go right into the Q&A is, do you have any goals? I want to make sure I wrote it down correctly. Do you have any goals that you're trying to pursue in terms of marketing for individual listings in the future?
I can start. So for me, in a post-COVID world, it would be nice to start doing events again and to start really engaging neighbors and other realtors. For example, we haven't done that in a really long time, just doing a wine and cheese night or a neighborhood open house type night. And so I'm excited to do those when we're able to again.
Yes. Russell?
I would say maybe I would like to do a better job of tracking exactly what we're doing marketing wise, what we're spending, like, you know, some of exactly what we're doing to market the property and how that ends up like in a sale price. And, you know, like how much of a percentage of your commission are you investing in marketing, and really kind of track that so that I can learn from it and try to adapt and improve it.
I appreciate that. Ken, you want to add on to this?
I feel like every listing is a learning opportunity. You know what I mean? So it's like, just get better with every listing.
Ken, do you have anything you want to add to that? I think Ken might be frozen right now for a second. I always like to make a joke when Marissa, our YPN co-chair, when she's on her, because she lives up like way up north, she always jokes about her igloo internet. Looks like Ken just dropped off. So we're going to continue here while Ken gets resubmitted. So someone has asked if anyone is willing to share their checklists. So what we'll do to everybody watching this, myself, Russell, Ashley, and Ken, we'll try and share our checklist with our YPN management team, and then we'll try and see if we can have this emailed out with the recording. If not, we'll drop it in the YPN Facebook group. At least you have a couple things that you can take a look at and make your own. The next question here is, sorry, I just answered that one. How would you market a condo assignment, and are there specific places where they can be advertised? So good question for Ashley, because I think you've done a few assignments over the last little while.
Yeah, so condo assignments are great to advertise on different closed forums. So for example, if you have an individual website, or even on Facebook groups, there's a lot of Facebook assignment groups as well. And then because we're not allowed to advertise on MLS, this is where you really need to use your realtor network. And that's something that I kind of underestimated when I first started, which I really find the importance of is, you know, places like this, the YPN OREA committee, and just networking with other realtors and being able to showcase your information. Because as soon as you start having a conversation with other realtors, they might say, oh, you know, I actually have a buyer for this or whatnot. And it's really, really helpful in terms of getting your listing sold. And then obviously, of course, social media as well.
Of course. Russell, do you guys do a lot of assignments on your end?
Really don't. Condo market is just kind of really taking off in our area now. I do a lot of investing personally, but not too much on the assignment side. I do find though that a lot of people don't know what they're doing with that stuff and are opening themselves up to, you know, HST issues potentially in the future and some stuff like that. So just be careful when you're working on that stuff. If you don't know what you're doing, and get advice from, you know, realtors that do understand it, lawyers, tax professionals, that sort of thing.
One thing I find works really well with assignments is having lawyers help draft the agreement so you don't miss anything. Sorry, Ashley.
Oh, I was just gonna add something to what I was saying, which is, you know, back to the lists, but an important list that I have is my newsletter email list. With your email list is really, it's good to keep it up to date, and then you actually can get a lot of traction if you send out your assignments there as well.
Yeah, for us, like we do a lot of pocket listings, a lot of exclusive commercial listings, and it goes back to your CRM and your database of investor clients. And most of the time, especially with attractive commercial property, investment properties like plazas, apartments, they don't go on MLS because they just never make it there. So.
And the same way we have a CRM for our clients, it's smart to keep a CRM for other realtors and break them down into groups of what they do. Like I have a CRM of realtors that are strictly just investor realtors who will never ever trade in my market unless they've got a client who matches perfectly to that. And they only do like off-market strict investments. So I target them for assignments. And there's just others that I target for other things, like for new listings in certain neighborhoods. So having that separate database really, really helps when you're trying to market certain things. Ken, welcome back. We were just talking about marketing assignments. Obviously, we know that we can't do them on the MLS right now, but being a former president/broker of record of a top condo brokerage, how are your agents marketing assignments?
So, I mean, one of the big things we were big fans of initially was, I know that they don't do it anymore, but Broker Bay was a big push for us when we were selling assignments, because as you guys mentioned, we can't put it on MLS. Going into just something as simple as going into Facebook groups that you're a part of and making sure that everyone's aware of this. It is very difficult, but the thing is, a lot of people who are in the new con industry, especially when they focus on the new sales, they tend to know each other quite well. So having the conversations with people on site, and having the conversations with them, because they may have a client who's looking for a specific product that they no longer have inventory for. And so having that relationship with people on site to be able to let them know, okay, well, I have a few assignments coming up. And so they will send clients your way. Because that's another, it's something, I'm not sure if anyone's mentioned it, and everyone's correct, having your lists, but really having conversations and relationships with people who sell on new sale sites, because they will end up probably having people who come into the site saying, well, I'm looking for a 1-bedroom. Everything's sold in the 1-bedroom 4 years ago, but we have penthouses. They can't afford it. Well, do you know anyone who has any assignments? And sometimes they will, and sometimes they will send them over to your way. So having that conversation is a great way to really build that that network of people to market your assignments.
Awesome, thanks, Ken. Ashley, a question came in for you, and it's what level of budget do you apply to your listings?
Well, it really depends on the client as well, and in terms of what they want to do, but it also depends on how you want to structure your commission too. So whether or not you include staging or not. So it always depends on an individual listing.
Agreed. And I guess, Russell, the same would be for you with your commercial listings. It all depends on the listing.
For sure, yeah. I mean, everyone's slightly different. Like we do try to introduce creativity sometimes into our listings. Like, to give you an example, we bought an office building for ourselves, and it's just kind of like a two-unit plaza, or big renovation, like exterior, interiors, old building. And we took one unit for ourselves for an office, and we are doing another unit. And so we went to our marketing people and we're like, hey, we kind of have this unit beside us. They're going to be our neighbor, kind of. It's a little bit of a different listing than what we're normally doing. Like, any ideas? And then they kind of like threw around some crazy ideas and came back with like a bachelor themed video that they wanted to shoot. And they called it the Teneter instead of the Bachelor. And like, it was pretty funny, and just, it had like 20,000 views, and people still talk to me about it today, like 9 months later. So, there's always an opportunity to use creativity to, market a listing, which kind of blows people away, and they'll always remember it.
That's brilliant. I do see a couple of questions that have come in regarding commission structures. We will not talk on commission. That it borders anti-competitive. So please talk to your own broker and your own managers of your brokerages about commission structuring. I do want to go into staging though, because if we're talking about marketing listings, who pays for it? So for me, we own a warehouse. We have 2 designers and movers that work for us. Personally, I love sourcing. So when I'm shopping, I buy things for my house, then I move stuff from my house into my staging, et cetera, et cetera. So I know how I structure mine. Ashley, who pays for your staging?
I pay for it. I take care of the staging for all of my listings. First of all, because I just like to control the situation. I don't want people to either, if the seller has a certain budget in mind, or if they don't want to spend a certain amount of money, I want to keep that aesthetic that we were kind of talking about earlier. And so I'm kind of insistent on having the staging and making sure that I can showcase the property in its best possible light.
Appreciate that.
I have a question for you guys, actually, if you don't mind. James,
Yeah.
Ashley, a lot of people do ask about this. So they like, are you aware, or do you track sort of what staging does to the sale price? Like, because I feel like I've seen stats and everything, but like, is there any like proprietary info out there, or anything that you kind of preach that way, like data that you've seen on that aspect?
Go ahead, Ashley, I'll let you start.
I don't have a specific number, but you definitely see that, and especially in a situation where it's a bidding war and somebody wants the property really, really badly. That's the difference that staging will do, is that they'll just pay that extra, however much money it is, because they love the home that much. And it's based on how they felt when they were at that property, that homey feeling that they got. And so it's tough to put an individual number to it, but
Yeah.
it definitely will increase the value a lot.
Buying sellers ask that question. It's always like a tough answer.
It's also psychological too, because only about 10% of buyers can visualize themselves in a space that's not staged. So the other 90%, you have to tell a story, and it's all psychology. It's all about making the space feel bigger and brighter than it actually is, and it's playing on the emotion of the buyer. So knowing who your target audience is. If, like, I just sold a 1-bedroom and den 2-bath condo, if the second bath had a tub, we would have staged the nursery, or the second, like the den, as a nursery versus an office. But the second bathroom is just a shower. It's very hard to bathe a baby in a shower in a second bath. So it would have been the perfect, yeah, Ken's nodding. I don't have kids, I don't know. But it made the perfect office space. So it's all about knowing who your target audience is for that style of property, and then staging it accordingly.
And to add to that too, I think it's also, unfortunately, not all staging is equal. I think, sometimes you go see a listing and it's a good staging, and sometimes you see another property and it's not so good staging. I would say probably in a situation where the person does not feel as comfortable, you're probably not yielding as high of a sale price. So, having proper staging that really showcases to what James was saying, exactly what a person is looking for is really important.
And sometimes it's not so much staging as it is just lifestyling and decluttering. Because and especially, I prefer my team not stage listings that have pets inside, because it's a lot of investment on our side to get the furniture cleaned. Like, we've had couches that have smelled like wet dog for weeks afterwards. We had to take them to an upholstery cleaner. It's a lot of money. So we'll just help the sellers declutter some of their stuff and kind of reposition their current furniture to make it work for the space. And it kind of goes into the question that Stephanie Unako, or Unkao, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong, just asked. If a home needs a lot of work, staging sometimes help, but sometimes it's just literally putting lipstick on a pig, and you're better to pitch it to a renovator or an investor and doing a virtual stage where you have renderings in the room that show what it can be.
Yeah, less is more.
Yeah. Since both Ashley and Russell talked about providing extra value for the investors, where do you find out information about basement heights or zoning or things like that?
Oh, go ahead.
Either just jump in.
I mean, firstly, obviously the municipality. If you as an agent have good contacts at the city, so we have good contacts at the building department and the planning department, and that goes a long way. If you can text someone and get a text back, or email someone and get an email back, and get the information quickly, because a lot of times it is not a simple answer. And to be able to get information from a source at the city and be able to forward it so that you guys can kind of make an educated decision is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I work in Toronto mainly, and so the city of Toronto, they're really helpful in the building department in terms of if you're looking for specific information. But you can also hire a consultant as well, and you can get them to come and take a look. It's similar to if you were to get a pre-list home inspection. You can get someone in to take a look and say, okay, this is something that would be okay for you to do for a basement apartment, or even to get a contractor in ahead of time to give a quote as to how much something may be. In homes, sometimes where you might see knob and tube, or you might see asbestos, you can have someone come in and give you a quote as to how much that'll cost for them to remediate that. And then you can, if your sellers aren't going to pay for that, you might just have that as a document for when you're selling the home.
And depending on the type of property, I recently had a listing where the house itself was a custom built home, but it sat on 200 acres. And the home was a luxury sale through and through, but half of the property had 5 different zonings on it. So I ended up bringing in a large Ontario-based commercial broker to consult the property. And it cost me, I think, about $7,500 to have them break down the acreage, what it looked like. So we have our proper investment package to go out to the investors. Yes, it's a huge upfront cost, but it's also like a large property. Ken, this question's for you. When you're helping agents build their plan, build their checklist, build their marketing, how are you helping them budget social media ads for a listing? Like what amounts too much? What amounts not enough?
Well, it's funny because when I was training agents, one of the things that I had to actually bring up was what are you planning on putting? How much money are you planning on investing in the property? And a lot of times people don't actually even have that number. They don't know what they're going to be investing and how much they're going to be investing. They don't even have a plan. So before even going on and putting money into it, because there's also multiple steps involved, and a lot of people who are not used to it are not used to putting money into or don't even know how to do it, is really just understanding the process of going out and doing it, right? What are you going to do to ensure that there is a marketing plan for your property? How are you going to list it? Where are you going, which avenues are you going to do it? Are you going to do it Instagram? Are you doing Facebook? Is the target audience that you're advertising to even look at these avenues or these media sites? Because if you're targeting downsizers, you may not necessarily be everyone's targeting first-time buyers at this point because everyone wants to get into a home. But, if you're looking for retirees, going on TikTok may not necessarily be where you want to pour most of your money into. James may argue otherwise, but I'm just saying it's just more of understanding who your target audience is before you even start putting money in. Because I know a lot of agents tend to be like, all right, well, I'm putting $300 into whatever their plan is for the next 7 days, which is great, but they have zero understanding what they're trying to do, how they're trying to get done. It's the same thing as putting $300 worth of door knocking flyers, but never going actually door knocking. So you have to understand before you start pouring money into it, is really understanding what is your plan, who are you targeting, why are you targeting them? Because if you just said, okay, well, I'm going to target everyone, well, that's going to be a lot harder to have a $300 budget for whatever you're planning on doing per listing, or $1,000 budget per listing. Going back into a little bit of the planning everything out. We may talk about this stuff, and it's funny because we're advertising our listing like a pro. I'm sure a lot of you out there realize that it's not really necessary at this point because the market's so hot. I've seen a lot of listings, and every once in a while I peruse Treb and I see, okay, well, this person put zero effort into listing their property, but they have 42 offers on the property. So I get it. Right now, it may seem like you're doing a whole lot of work for no reason, but I've been in the industry, and I'm sure a lot of people's been in the industry for a long time. I've seen in 2008, I've seen in 2011, I've seen in 2017, markets crash, right? And the crash is not the same as this, 30% less than what you bought it for. It's probably going to be 30% of what the offers are going to be at, right? The last time I saw a big crash in terms of something, people were getting was sellers in 2017 were expecting 1.5. But they weren't getting 1.5. They were selling at 1, but they bought it at 950. So they weren't losing money. They just weren't getting what they expected. And so when the market changes, which it can and probably will, and it will change very quickly, all of what we are explaining to you right now and all of the plans that you're doing is going to have much more of an effect on your business, because what you do today is going to result in business in the next 10 years, and you're going to see a slow market. And I'm sure everyone who's been in the industry here for long enough, they see when the market turns and it's not as easy, when the sellers actually turn to you and say, I need your help to sell my home because it's been on the market for 45, 60, 90 days. They're going to ask, what is your plan? And if you haven't planned anything out because you're used to a market and it's really easy in Toronto to be like, well, I don't have to do a whole lot, you're going to start to realize, okay, your business is going to drop significantly because your sellers are going to come to you and say, well, what is your plan? And you don't have anything. You don't have anything set out. You're not in this industry, and I'm hoping you're not in this industry to be here for a little bit. You're here for a long time. This is the YPN. You're here for the next 30, 40, 50 years. We don't retire. We just kind of die out. So it's one of those situations where you need to plan for a down market, and it's not easy, but it's And it seems like it's a waste of time, but it really isn't, because when the market takes a downturn, you're going to need a plan. When sellers, I mean, we all know to list to last, that kind of old adage. When people are trying to sell their home and you need to give them a plan, they can't just be like, well, I don't know, because it used to sell in 7 days. Well, now it's 90 days. What are you planning on doing? What's your steps when it doesn't, when you don't have any showings in 7 days, which has happened? What do you do when your client is looking to you and saying, well, why isn't the property sold? And it's been 30 days and you haven't had any showings. This is what we are doing this for, is because right now it makes zero sense, because I've seen people list properties, they didn't even clean the place. They got 20 offers on the property. They could have gotten more. This is where this stuff helps. But when the market takes a downturn, when the market shifts and they come to you and saying, I need your help, you better have a plan. You better have a program set in place so that you can actually help them. Again, those are the agents who will like skyrocket in their industry, because that's exactly what happens. It's, the market will change and all of a sudden people will start saying, well, I can't do this anymore. I don't have the plan. It's really, really hard to be successful in this industry. And the ones who are set up for this are going to be the top agents in this industry in the next 10, 15 years.
I think that's the perfect way to close off this master series. Ashley, Ken, Russell, thank you guys so much for spending your morning with me. I learned a lot from you guys, and I hope everyone in the audience did too. Like I mentioned, this recording will be out in a couple of days, and we're going to try and put together a few of our checklists and have our YPN team send out to you. And also make sure you check out our YPN Facebook group, request to join the group. And we will see you guys on Wednesday, March 9th to celebrate International Women's Day with our female-led panel. So thank you guys again, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.